just calling a friend and say, like, I feel sad and I feel sad for no reason. And knowing that what's helpful is when it's a supportive friend. Maybe we can have friends that are not always going to be as empathic, but just reaching out, that's going to change our mood. I get the privilege of working with kiddos who talk about their grandparents or their parents, and like I mentioned, they don't always verbalize all these beautiful things to their loved ones immediately, but they feel it. They're like, oh, when I spent the holiday with grandma making cookies, or, you know, I felt her love and her hug. That's priceless. You can't put a price tag on that.
Welcome back, Linwood Unified School District families, to Beyond the Classroom podcast, a podcast that supports the whole child by supporting you, the parent who shows up every single day. Today, we're opening a conversation that hits home to a lot of families during this time of year. Our episode today, When Winter Feels Heavy, features grounding yet genuine and compassionate insights from our very own licensed marriage and family therapist, Joanna Frank. Together, her and I will be discussing and exploring how colder days and darker months impact our kids, but also us as parents, and what we can do to manage our depressive symptoms by bringing in light and warmth and connection and even wellness into the season. So let's go ahead and dive in. Thank you, Joanna, for being here.
Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad. Can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself, your background, your education, your experience, and what even brought you into the field of like mental health?
So I am a licensed marriage and family therapist by training, but our titles here at Linwood are licensed clinical social workers. And I've been here for a couple years now with Linwood Unified. And I'm currently at elementary school, so I'm placed at Roosevelt Elementary, Lincoln Elementary, and Helen Keller Elementary School. And it's been a pleasure working with everyone in the schools and in the field here. My background, I started doing therapy and being fascinated by psychology because I'm very deeply curious about people, but I also learned a lot about myself, my own family systems, and relationships, and how relationships are the key component in how we relate to one another and in our world. So it's a big element, and I love kids. I love the young ones and the older ones, and it's a really fun experience working with everyone.
Well, I know you personally, and you do an amazing job, well, not with just with our kids, but with the families, and you work so well with all of our staff. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's go ahead and start off. So today we're discussing something that can feel very heavy for like a lot of people during this time of year. Seasonal depression is also known as like seasonal affective disorder, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. So if you can you kind of explain to our families what that is and what might be happening to an individual both emotionally or biologically when seasons are changing?
Yeah. So I think we don't always have a lot of these conversations about these seasonal changes, and seasonal affective disorder is it's a form of clinical depression that goes hand in hand with the season. So more often than not, that it's happening when we are shifting into the fall and winter months, and that has a lot to do with the light and light exposure and the season shift that we're having a lot less light in the fall and winter months. It's different than the winter blues, and a lot of people feel what they experience during winter blues. You could kind of think of it as winter blues as being a more mild form. It's not a clinical depression, but our bodies might feel a little bit slower, a little bit more tired. We might not have the same level of energy.
Yeah.
Whereas seasonal affective disorder, someone is fatigued and they're really meeting more of that criteria of clinical depression. They may have significant difficulties waking up. And so the difference between the two is when their daily life is much more impacted than with winter blues.
Yeah.
And then too, what we consider is that the holidays and the season can be a really joyous time. It's a magical time, and parents and families want to create that magic and fun for families. But it can also be a time of stress with the holidays, or the expectations of living up to all of those things that families want to create for the kids, especially this year. Like financially, economically, it's really, really challenging. Something else that comes up for families and individuals is the grief that comes up. And that's very, very different than seasonal affective disorder. It's just the yearning for and the missing of someone. And that's different, but it's also something to still acknowledge.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier, you kind of started off with the light, and I find that so fascinating because we live in one of the sunniest regions in the world, right? And in preparing for today too, I was learning about how in California, when you're like hitting like spring and summer months, we typically have about like 11, 12 hours of sunlight every day, right? But when fall and winter hit, we have about 7, 8 hours of sunlight. So we lose a significant amount of sunlight. And that affects everything, our circadian rhythm, how our body is responding. Can you kind of explain or elaborate the importance of light and why that can lead to some form of seasonal affective disorder or just seasonal depression?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't know, on a very basic level, when we're in light, we feel energized. It feels good in our bodies, and we're like almost basking in the sunlight, we talk about. And when we don't have that light, we kind of go inward. We kind of go into like a bear mode. We want to hibernate. But that light gives us energy. It also gives oxygen to our mitochondria on a cellular level. And that's like a whole other neuroscience around it. But it's pretty fascinating. Those that live around closer to the equator, they have longer days of sunlight. And so they don't have a tendency or as high of a tendency to have seasonal affective disorder because they get that exposure to sunlight and the UV rays. Whereas in North America, it's much more common, especially in the Pacific Northwest or in Alaska. And we talk about California, and yes, we have beautiful sunny California. But about 90% of us are indoors for a good chunk of the day. And so we're not being always intentional about getting that sunlight. And sunlight is something that is actually a recommendation for individuals when they're shifting, when they're experiencing some winter blues, and or when they're noticeably having the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder.
Yeah, light is very powerful. We always hear, at least in the world of therapy, go on these walks and be in the sun because of the vitamin D and how that affects your mood component. My understanding of like the light and what it does to the brain is that when you're exposed to light, the light is going into your eyes, and the eyes communicate to your brain, and your brain basically, as a result of exposure to light, it releases like melatonin and then serotonin.
Yes.
And serotonin, for those of you who are not aware, it's the feel-good chemical, right?
Yeah.
It's what really regulates your emotions, your sleep, your sexuality, your digestive system. It affects like so much of you. So light is very important, but because we're losing so much light, then the part of the recommendation is like, well, that's part of the exercise, right?
Yeah.
Get some light, but then we don't have the light.
Yeah.
So,
and we're kind of exposed to the wrong type of light. So when we go outside, it's naturally on a sunny day, it's about like 100,000 lux naturally, and that gives us a good amount of vitamin D. On a rainy day, you would think that it's substantially less. It's only about 20% less. So you're still getting a good amount of sunlight from rainy days or cloudy days. And that's much healthier than getting it on artificial light. So one could utilize artificial light, and that's actually the recommendation, red light. And you mentioned melatonin. So when we utilize light, especially at night, and reducing the blue light, so all the devices that we're on, the TV, electronics,
our
cell phones, and we're guilty of it as well, right? That light emits a wake signal and reduces melatonin. So some people are familiar with melatonin as a supplement that they take over the counter to help them go to sleep.
Right.
But it's something that we actually naturally produce. And when our body can naturally produce the melatonin and the serotonin, that's the chemical hormone that is being pumped into our body, then we're better able to combat seasonal changes and when we're feeling sluggish or more tired.
It's so amazing how our bodies are created to naturally protect itself and to combat the depression, which is such a simple task of like light exposure, right? Do you think that there's a certain population that is more prone to seasonal depression in general?
Definitely. Research indicates that, unfortunately, women are at a higher likelihood of having risk of a seasonal affective disorder, and also youth. So I think that the youth component is more research has been done around that. As well, people who have a history of clinical depression, they're more likely to have this onset during the seasonal change, the fall-winter seasonal change. So like I mentioned, the fall-winter is the majority of individuals experience it, but some individuals may experience it during spring and summer. But the majority is during fall with the light changes. So that family history, having the family history of depression as well, is something that it's helpful to know. Because, say, for example, mom and dad or grandpa may experience seasonal depression. Their grandchildren or children may also experience it without them both knowing. And when one parent knows or one family member knows, they can help educate and help link them to resources that are helpful for them.
Now, for a parent, whether it's for themselves or their kid, like, what are some of the signs leading up? Like, hey, there's about to be a slump. I'm not feeling well. I just mood-wise, I don't feel like myself. What are like some of the signs or symptoms that we call them that are kind of like a warning or a clue to look out for before it gets really bad?
One indicator that is helpful for others to be aware of is when someone is starting to withdraw from the things that they typically like to do. We call them pleasurable activities. So say, for example, somebody is an avid basketball player or they love to crochet, and then starting the fall months, they start slipping and they no longer want to participate in this thing that they know, that family members and other people know that they enjoy. Another thing is irritability, right? So with teens, this is a hard one because they can often have some irritability, but when that irritability seems like it's happening more days than not, that's something to look out for. Some other things are biological changes, just like we talked about. So the changes in appetite. In the winter months, it's very common to have cravings for carbohydrates and sugars. And there's not anything typically wrong. That just because somebody wants more carbohydrates and sugars doesn't mean that they are depressed. But
it's like there's a similarity between us and bears, huh?
Right, absolutely.
We want to eat and sleep more.
Well, I mean, we're human, right? Yeah. Like, I try to not stigmatize too much when there's small nuance changes, but when they're significant and there's this significant weight gain or significant weight loss, that can be an indicator when somebody is experiencing clinical depression.
Well, because back in the day, before we had like these heaters and these warm homes, there was a lot of coldness, right? People lived very differently than they do in today's Western society. And our bodies were made actually to slow down during winter months originally and to eat more, because if we were so active and energetic, we would probably go crazy and lose our minds. Knowing that we would have to stay indoors more when it's so cold outside, and that could be very dangerous back in the day. But with so much advancement in technology since the heater's been made, then we tend to want to still be out, but yet we're indoors more now during the winter months. But so we were naturally made to eat more, to have the more carbs, and to sleep more. But I think the whole technology kind of has messed up our rhythm, our system, right?
Our personal rhythm, and then our societal rhythm as well. Absolutely.
And it's like these major adjustments, and we don't know why our body's reacting this way. So sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to kind of throw in that little tidbit too.
And I personally have a dog, and I think it's fascinating because she's always outside sunbathing. So it's like she knows that she needs the vitamin D too. So it's a natural instinct. And so when parents are often saying, go outside, get outside, that's a healthy recommendation, right? But oftentimes it's when the parents and guardians are saying those things that teenagers are like, oh, no, like whatever that person's saying is not important. But there's truth behind it. It's just how can we wrangle them in knowing like that actually feels good.
Yeah, nature itself teaches us so much.
Absolutely.
It really does.
Yeah.
I remember my dog would teach me that too, the sunbathing. I would love to sunbathe more.
Right? They just they look, but the sun feels good. It absolutely does, Exercise is one of those things that I recommend across the board, whether somebody does meet criteria for depression or not, is that exercise is one of the quickest ways in which we can change our mood in a very quick way. So not for the purposes of gaining weight, not for the purposes of losing weight, not for the purposes of gaining muscle, because society and social media will tell you all those things, but by getting outside or moving our body and sweating, it can really combat some of those seasonal changes, and also just when we're feeling lethargic and tired.
And to piggyback off of that, the time, there's a time differential that is effective too. Like when you're in the light, like in the sun, it recommends only maybe 30 minutes of walking. But on a cloudy, darker day, it's still recommending to exercise.
Yes.
But at a longer
time.
Yeah, about
absolutely.
Approximately 2 hours of walking in the cloudy days. And we don't always have the 2 hours to walk outside. So when you're making the recommendation of exercise and we don't necessarily have the opportunity or the motivation to exercise like 2 hours in the dark or in the cloudy outside, is there another alternative to exercise but indoors?
Definitely one can do. So if there's a difference, so if somebody knows that they're just having the slight slump and they're exercising, they can explore whether or not to supplement with vitamin D, right? And that might be a conversation with their primary care physician or pediatrician, and blood work can determine whether or not somebody has vitamin D deficiency. But if we're shifting into doing indoor exercising and somebody does have seasonal affective disorder, or they're on the more winter blues type of spectrum, they can actually exercise with red light. And red light emits not the same level of lux, which is like the volume of light exposure, but it can be really, really helpful. And if they're doing exercise outside or getting that sunlight exposure, it's best to do in the morning, because that's the way we're regulating our sleep-wake cycle. So as soon as we get up in the morning, whether somebody experiences the sluggishness or on a more severe spectrum, that real difficulty, being very intentional of trying to get that light exposure from a red light lamp or from going outside, opening the blinds and like literally basking in the sun for a few minutes at least is really, really beneficial.
So would you say that we could all utilize like red therapy prior to seeing a doctor and a therapist, or do you recommend like that there's like a process?
Yeah, so there's not going to be negative impacts from utilizing a lamp. So they're marketing a lot of expensive lamps that are for red light, and to give that exposure, you don't necessarily have to get one. There's just a recommendation that it needs to be a red light and of certain lux. Okay. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to spend $600 or $1,000 on a fancy light. It could just be changing that light bulb to a red light, and that's going to give that exposure. But it may need to be a bigger light bulb than just the small light bulb. But there's no negative impact from that. The negative impact and what people have experienced, and there's been a lot of conversation, and that's a bit more medical, is from dermatologists talking about the sun and how that it's beneficial, yet we have to be very conscientious of sunlight exposure on our skin. That's a different conversation,
right.
But we hear, like, people hear that so often, that the sun is dangerous.
Right.
But just like you said, that we are actually getting the sunlight from our eyes. Yeah. So we're not looking directly at the light, but we're needing to have that exposure.
Well, that is to our eyes, and like what you just said, the skin. Yeah. The sun does hit the skin. It also conveys a message to the body to create serotonin just through skin contact of sunlight. But I think what I was trying to get at was if somebody's like going through seasonal affective disorder, which AKA is also known as SAD, right? When they're feeling really sad, or just depression in general, red light doesn't replace the other resources if they're like really severely needing additional support. Yes. Like it can't replace other things. Yeah. Like they should still maybe go see a professional.
Definitely. So it may be a therapist or a clinical team may recommend a different variety of things, and the lighting exposure would be one of them. Okay. For a good amount of people, that might be sufficient, but we don't want to just utilize one tool and one tool only. So the light exposure is beneficial. The vitamin D might be the recommendation from a psychiatrist or a physician to do that blood work. And I think we're going to be going into it as well, but talking to someone. So seeking out those resources, doing cognitive behavioral therapy can be incredibly beneficial. And then in some cases, medication may be indicated, but that's really a conversation around if that person is not seeing improvements with some of the other things, or it's very, very severe.
Yeah. I think this is such a sensitive time for so many families and for so many different reasons, kind of like what you were highlighting. What it could be just be grief, the absence of loved ones who are no longer with us. There's so many things that drive depression during this season. But for parents and even educators or just adults that have, I guess, interactions with children or teenagers, how can they help the kids without minimizing what they're feeling and going through? Because a lot of, like, I'm a mom, right? Yeah. And historically, for me, Christmas time could be both sad because of the single parent aspect, right? And or it could be like the financial stressor, like you want to give your kids everything. And if the kids are like, Mom, why didn't you decorate? Or are you going to decorate? And it's like, well, do I have the budget to decorate? Do I have the budget to buy you your Christmas gift that's on your wish list? Versus like, I could go buy maybe a couple $5 toys for you. But as the kid gets older, their wishes and desires change, right? Yeah. So as a parent, I could internalize that grief and that emotional inept, like feeling incompetent, right, for my child. And then my child could also feel like, the absence of a parent and that they're not going to get anything for Christmas. And then there's that component. So as a parent, I know I'm talking and I'm kind of like babbling on, but I'm just curious, like, how can we support kids without trivializing and minimizing the weight of what they carry?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a very valid question. And I would say one of those things is to honoring and acknowledging how we, the adults and caregivers, feel as well. So society says a lot about the holidays. There's so many expectations, and I mentioned it can be a beautiful season, and there is a sense of like magic and family time. But there's also that sense of maybe loss or expectations or hardship for some people. And normalizing that, honoring that it can also be a really difficult time is helpful from whether it's school staff or parents or grandparents. Hopefully sometimes too taking away from the idea of some of the material goods. So yes, of course, the kiddos absolutely, they're going to have like 1,000,001 wish list of all the things that they want, and they know what they want, and it's some pricey technology, right?
Right.
They don't always verbalize what they want or what they need is that quality family time. It's so rare that they're communicating that directly to their family members, but oftentimes that is what fills their cup. That's what actually brightens them internally. And telling kids that, they sometimes get it, but it's really just doing it. But acknowledging that, hey, like, I know that this can be a hard time, that maybe someone is missing a loved one during this time. Something that I recommend even parents saying, especially this economic challenges that we're all facing, is that communicating as the parent to the other family members that this year we're going to do a little bit something different. We're going to be focusing on creating more memories and spending time as a family than on material goods. Or this year we're going to be volunteering our time and to demonstrate that there are some other people who may have it more difficult as well.
Yeah. And even as a mom, sometimes even having an internal dialogue of telling yourself, like, I'm enough. And what I mean by that is that kind of what you were highlighting is that my presence is enough for my child. It can be a gift to my kid because I can't replace my presence with a present, right? Absolutely. And we could really confuse the two. When it could be the mom in the kitchen, maybe baking cookies or baking brownies, and the smell like just fills the house. And those are actually memories that you're creating for your kid, whether they're joining you in the kitchen or just the smell itself is a memory for the child. And the children appreciate that, right?
Absolutely. Those develop like core memories for them. And I get the privilege of working with kiddos who talk about their grandparents or their parents, and like I mentioned, they don't always verbalize all these beautiful things to their loved ones immediately, but they feel it. They're like, oh, when I spent The holiday with grandma making cookies, or, I felt her love and her hug. That's priceless. You can't put a price tag on that.
No, it's so true. Because let's think about our memories as kids, right? Let's talk about that for a minute. Like, at least for me, Christmas, we have traditions every year, but I don't really remember the gifts. I remember the experience of the tradition, like getting together and decorating the tree. Family getting together and having a Christmas dinner. But I can't really recall significant gifts that were given to me. I did get presents, but
the
memories,
gifts itself,
it's not that. That's not the memory for me.
It's the collective feeling around that time and that family.
Right.
And just the excitement of the day. And that's, I think, we've kind of taken away from, is that, I think when I was younger too, we got a lot of gifts, but there were a lot of small and cheaper gifts. So we've gone away from the small, cheaper gifts or more affordable gifts to like the big buck gifts that are $1,000 phone that's very expensive. But it's those memories and the sensations around it, just like you were describing about like being in the kitchen and cooking. They can remember how they personally felt, but also their memory can even take them from like smelling that again, even though there may not be there. And what I will say too is when we have lost someone, when we have a family member who has died, it's so helpful to talk about those memories. It's painful and it's hard and it can bring up really difficult emotions, but kids can feel that sentiment, perhaps if their parent is maybe grieving the loss of their parent, their grandparent, or a loved one. And it's that's a memory that we can talk about, that I miss so-and-so too. And they're in my heart, or whatever tradition around that as well.
No, it's so true. I mean, I like to utilize a lot of like personal story and experiences for our families. And I remember in 2014, in January, we lost my grandfather. And in June of the same year, we lost my grandmother. So they both died in 1 year. But for my aunts and uncles and my mom, it was the first time that they actually felt like orphans, because they lost their mom and their dad all within 1 year. So then I was pregnant when we lost both of my grandparents. And then when my son was born in November, it was like on Christmas Day when I brought my baby into the house. He wasn't even a full month old yet. I remember my aunt just started crying, just bawling her eyes out, because like what you're saying, for them, Christmas felt so sad because of the losses of that year. But then you bring in this baby and it brought in like hope and joy in the midst of grief and loss, right? And it wasn't the presents that made them feel better. It was just my son having a baby in the home, like that presented life and hope and a future. But I do remember that Christmas morning, them feeling the sadness initially and the tears of grief and yet of sorrow, and then the tears of joy. It was this simultaneous, like multiple realities coexisting together, right? But yeah, Christmas can be so heavy because of the losses, but then talking about it, like you're saying.
Absolutely.
And cherishing those memories, not shoving it down.
Right. That's really important. Even though they can come up with, I think that's something that you're highlighting, is that in that moment, is that there are multiple feelings that come up. And I think that we don't always talk about that. You can feel simultaneously joy and also that sad or that longing for somebody. And the more that we model that in talking to children about those complex feelings, the more that they're better understanding to how they feel as well.
Right. Yeah, because they truly can coexist together.
Absolutely.
And ignoring one doesn't help the other either.
Right.
It can affect the other feelings.
We try to protect those that we love from seeing our pain, but in some ways we do the opposite effect.
Right. This is so good. I feel like we could go in so many different directions with this conversation.
Right.
But earlier you did mention like resources. What kind of resources are out there that can help support our parents and families that maybe want to have like an extra like income or access to gifts or access to healthcare or mental health support? Like, how can we support our families to support themselves and their children with their wellness?
Yeah, I mean, working at Linwood is a great experience because we work all as a collective and we have a lot of wonderful resources. I recognize that sometimes as an individual it's really difficult to be vulnerable to school personnel and say, these are the family challenges that we're experiencing. And I just want to highlight when families tell us this information, especially as clinicians, like that information is confidential. We're not sharing it with other people.
Right.
But at school, we have the counselors that are available to help support us clinicians. All of us are available at all the elementary, middle, and high schools. And then we have community school case managers as well, who are really great in helping connect to resources, more tangible resources.
Okay.
So if someone is having food insecurity or they're having challenges with housing, we may not necessarily always have the exact thing that we can provide, but we can provide a resource or help that person explore resources as well. And then sometimes there's a language barrier that happens as well. And so we do have bilingual staff to help support that. But what I will say in terms of the holiday season and the winter blues and seasonal affective disorder, what's one of the really beneficial takeaways is having that awareness about oneself. So if this is something that I'm describing, like, wait a second, I notice that every winter I just pull away, that I become a little bit more of a hermit, that I'm not enjoying life as much, that I might have a little bit more irritability, that I gained weight or lost weight or changing in my sleep. Sleep is a huge indicator of our mood and our state. Then those are the signs to really look out for. And when we have that awareness, parents often pick up on those cues.
Yeah.
And when they pick up on those cues, if maybe their adolescent or teenager is not so responsive to them, they can seek us out and they can say, hey, do you mind checking in with so-and-so and see how they're doing? And we're happy to do so.
Right.
As well, if someone does have a diagnosis, they're most likely to meet that diagnosis, they've had to have this for 2 years. So over 2 consecutive years, they're experiencing this pattern. So when we know, we can often, it doesn't matter how intelligent someone is, sometimes we forget. Like we have like this amnesia, like come spring, come summer, it feels
Convenient
good.
amnesia.
Yeah. It happens to all of us, right? And it's like, oh, I forgot during daylight savings, I'm just like, I hunker down and my energy is low. So having that awareness and trying to plan around that is really beneficial. So like I mentioned, say if someone is a basketball player and they play basketball and that person knows that they're going to go into the winter blues, that they have a high tendency to winter blues, or they may meet that criteria for seasonal affective disorder, then it would be helpful that they can transition and keep that habit during the fall and winter time, or the time that they're struggling the most. So say, for example, in the summer, they have a lot of light exposure, maybe they can play basketball at a park or something. In the winter, maybe that's not as feasible. They're not going to get as much sunlight, but maybe we can adapt. Maybe the family and the youth can adapt and play indoors, get that exercise. They're doing that pleasurable activity. They may not have the motivation to do so, but they're still engaging in that. And so trying to keep those hobbies that are really helpful and socially engaged is going to be another way to combat the deep depths of some of the challenges in the mood.
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is basically awareness is key, flexibility is key, and adaptation is key.
Yes.
So all 3 of those elements are so important in maintaining your wellness during like the winter seasons.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because even though you're outdoors with bright natural sunlight, then going indoors, you still have light. Yeah. It might not be vitamin D light, but it's still a form of light that is still penetrating your bodily senses, and then you get the mobility that helps in so many other ways, right? So continue doing what you're doing, and maybe even do more of it during winter seasons. Yeah.
The other thing that comes into play, we're approaching a 3-week break. So what happens when we're on break, we shift our routine completely. Everybody goes to sleep later, and they wake up later. So in theory, parents think, or others think, like they're getting more sleep. They might be getting more hours of sleep, but they're interrupting their sleep-wake cycle, and they might have more irritability because of that. So
when you say interrupting the cycle, are you referring to they're interrupting like their REM cycle?
Mm-hmm. Well, their REM cycle that happens on a 24-hour clock. So even though we're awake, we still have shifts. We have slumps in our energy levels typically after we eat as well, because it goes into insulin and all kinds of things, right? But that shift does happen. So that sleep-wake cycle gets impacted if say every day, Monday through Friday, we're waking up at 7 o'clock, and then now the break happens and they're going to sleep, they're waking up at 11. That completely can interrupt their internal system.
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And then that could produce another set of problems actually during winter break, I would assume, to a degree.
Yeah. It's like when toddlers need a nap. They have, and the more structured their nap is, it's helpful, right? So when a toddler gets a nap, and when they get their nap during their nap time, their mood
they
is
wake up so angelic.
They're sweet. Well, they might be still a little bit sweaty, and they might have their moods break. But then when the toddler doesn't nap, whoo, that's going to be a hard day for the toddler, and then a hard day for everyone else.
Yes, everybody else feels the collateral damage of their lack of sleep. Speaking from experience right now, because my daughter fights her naps. Oh my goodness, she fights her naps. But she's so precious when she sleeps and when she wakes up. Like,
that's good. Yay.
She's delicious when she's happy. But that makes a lot of sense, because that's, relating to parents, that's exactly how my son is. Like, there's no routine during winter break. Okay, you're going to go to sleep at 11, 12, 1 in the morning, and then, but for my son, he won't sleep in, and that's where it affects him, because his body will naturally still wake up at 6 or 7, and so he's really not getting enough sleep, and there's like, it affects him in a different kind of way. Everybody's so different, right?
But that's his natural sleep-wake cycle doing its job. Yeah. And that's the hard thing, right? Especially if we're not morning people. I'm not personally a morning person, but trying to keep that schedule on the weekends and breaks is really helpful. And you find that your energy is stable throughout the week. But when you're not getting that sleep, we experience more irritability. But most times, a lot of times, it's the other people around us that experience the irritability without us having the awareness of it.
So with that being stated, are you recommending maintaining some type of consistent or structured routine even during like winter breaks?
Yeah, definitely. As much as possible. Of course, there's going to be fluctuations, and like Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, there's a tendency to stay up later, or the excitement of everything happening. But if parents can help keep some type of routine during that 3-week schedule, it's going to be really helpful. And also for the summer months too. And then helping a gradual adjustment when they go back to school, because when they go back, we have 3 weeks vacation, or in the summer a whole month or a month and a half. There is a marked shift that they had maybe 8-10 hours of sleep, and then they're no longer getting that. And so oftentimes when we're sleep deprived, behaviors occur.
Yeah. So as a parent, like if my kid is getting out of sync with the routine during winter break, and I'm noticing that depressive symptoms are actually beginning to manifest themselves, and my kid doesn't want to do anything, but I'm like urging them, like, at what point do I say, you don't have a choice, buddy. You're going to get up and you're going to get out of the house, and we're going to go do this thing? Like, as a parents, do we tiptoe around our kids, or do we have to set some of the firm boundaries for them?
Yeah. The firm boundaries are to their benefit, right? Yeah. But it also, as a parent, you're realizing like, ooh, I'm going to have a battle with them about this. Like, they're like, why do I have to wake up early? It's not a school day. But it's really for their benefit. So if we can cluster it around having a positive experience, that it's not necessarily forceful. For us adults, I know that my morning routine consists of coffee. Like, I enjoy my coffee, and that's something that I look forward to. So helping create a morning routine for the break time that is pleasurable as well is going to be beneficial. So maybe they don't have to get dressed right away, and they can stay in their cozy clothes, or maybe we can reward them with like a breakfast that they enjoy, or maybe they have that task that they're helping to make breakfast, and that's something that they really enjoy.
So as a parent, kind of reframing it in our minds, using your own words, is to their benefit.
Yeah, absolutely to their benefit. But when kids are so savvy. When it's forceful, they feel it and they will shut it down as soon as possible.
So our approach matters.
Our approach and how we wrangle them in about it, and also trying to model that ourselves too.
Yeah. Because sometimes I'll encourage families. I think having family activities is very important, whether that's in the home or out of the home. And a lot of times I try to come from the lens of like low cost, no cost. So how can I really bring in memorable type of activities and events for my family? Because I think when you have something to look forward to, it's basically anticipation. And I think that's actually one of the remedies, in my opinion, for even situational depression.
Absolutely.
When I have something to look forward to, it kind of pulls me out of a darker, gloomy type of thinking and mood, right? So sometimes I'll encourage our families too. There's so many activities, like Linwood, for example, they're doing a parade, like a Christmas parade. So you could look for your local parades. You could look for toy drives. So many churches as well, they'll do like 3 to 5 day daily evening activities where there's like the fake snow and they're giving hot cocoa away, or they're giving the gifts away, or they have live animals and little productions outside. There's so much, I think, in our community, and I know you highlight the case managers can really give practical resources. So again, they could talk to them, but there's a plethora of free activities, and like even like tree lighting and Christmas story time at your local library. There are so many events that our kids and families can join and do together to really create not just harmony in the home, but also create that warmth, and it does bring in the light and the connection and even the wellness, like kind of what we were highlighting way earlier when we first started this podcast episode, that our families can do during the season.
I know, for example, that they're in December, there's a list that's out for parents, and maybe we can post it, of all the museums that are free on certain days in December. So
so good.
Planning something like that. But just like you said, there's a lot of free things. I will say sometimes it's planning and creativity around those things. But having those things that kiddos look forward to, or even asking them, like, these are 3 activities. Which activity would you like to participate? Not actually telling them, do you want to go or not? Because they might initially say, no,
I want to stay home
I don't want to go. I want to play my
PS5.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
But so you often get that response from the kiddos, but then when they're doing it, when they're playing with fake snow, when they're doing story time, they're like, oh, this was so much fun.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you don't have to break the bank to go have fun. I know this week an agency was telling me, like in San Pedro, they're going to be having a Christmas boat parade. And I think if you're in certain sections, you might have to pay to go in. But then in like maybe up in the hills or the mountains, like you could watch from afar and still create maybe a family picnic by watching the boat parade.
And it's a fun experience.
Yeah, there's so much out there. And one of the things I would recommend, and we never talked about this, there's something called Kids Guide Magazine. I don't know if you ever heard of that.
I think back in the day, if it's
They
still the
still
same,
have
I was like, what? I remember
They
way
have
back then.
I first learned about it when my son was in preschool, but to this day I still access it, through, especially during the summer months, for activities for him. So they have it online, and it'll give you all the different activities throughout so many different cities of what they're doing. There's the at-cost ones and then the free ones for our families. But I think it's so important. This is such a beautiful, and can be like a very festive, warm season for our families, that with the right resources and encouragement, I think it could help with seasonal affective disorder.
And whatever the barrier sometimes, like transportation, I know that Linwood is now providing bus passes, and that in of itself, you can make a whole like field trip of taking the bus down to San Pedro to go see the lights, or to Long Beach. So it's just, like I said, the creativity and the planning around it. But there's a lot. We're really, really lucky to live in a community and in the surrounding community that have a lot of events that are going on.
And I think an important thing that we could do just naturally is creating rituals, or what we used the word earlier, traditions within our home. What can a ritual or tradition look like for some of our families during the holiday season?
So, I mean, some of those things that we can mimic from what we do at school too. Like, so at schools we do like spirit days that are like pajama days. So something as easy as that could be done. Like, okay, this day we're doing a pajama day at home. Or oftentimes like a ritual around baking cookies or baking in general. For a lot of families, I've heard, for the parents, the caregivers, they actually find a stress relief in baking, and the kids and everyone get together to do it. Taking walks, walking, going to the beach, even though, yes, it's a cooler season, but it's still like something refreshing and nice to do. Being in nature. Yes, we may have to do some planning around it, but just being in nature, seeing something different, getting fresh air feels good to us.
And even something as simple as even just watching a holiday movie, like Home Alone.
Yeah,
That,
that's a classic, right?
It is.
Yeah.
It'd be like every Christmas Eve or the day before. I know a lot of our families celebrate on Christmas Eve night or even Christmas Day, but there's so much that we can do to begin these traditions with our kids and our families.
And there's a lot of beautiful cultural traditions too, that we have a really diverse mix of cultures, and we can also adopt, even if we don't necessarily are from that culture, we can adopt some of those things. Like, say, for example, someone who likes tamales in Christmas time, there's a whole process of tamale making. Someone may have a friend who knows how to do it and say, hey, can I join? Or can my kids join so that they can learn too? So that's the really cool thing is just...
That's our ritual. We don't make it. But every Christmas morning, it's a tamale breakfast.
Okay,
I love it.
Yeah. Something warm, you know, to feel good.
Yes, with tapatio and everything on it.
Sounds good. You're making me hungry.
No, but thank you so much for being here. Usually when we begin to conclude our podcast, we do a take-home challenge for our families. So when we were talking about seasonal affective disorder, we did highlight it, that it often starts around the fall to winter time. What is something that, for a parent that's saying, hey, I really identify with what you're saying, and I might have a form of seasonal affective disorder, or maybe some of the symptoms of it, or my teenager does, or maybe my 6-year-old child does. Whether it's a parent or a child, what is like one small thing that a parent who's identifying and recognizing that they may have some of these symptoms, what is one small thing that they could do today to begin to manage or to even navigate the heaviness of depression during wintertime?
Having that awareness is huge, so that's a big one. And then knowing that it's common, so you're not alone in the experience that it's common. But then also to talk to somebody about it. You can talk to a supportive friend if you're not quite ready to talk to a therapist or to someone. But say, hey, I noticed I just don't feel myself during the winter months, and just even saying that out loud can be really beneficial. And say, wait, I'm not the only one who experiences that. And I think it sounds like a really simple thing, but having that awareness, it's like, oh, okay, well, I know this about myself, and I remember all the activities that I used to do before. Why don't I have the same energy to do it? And what can I do possibly to re-engage?
Yeah. And some of the simple things are the hardest things to do. Yeah. I mean, it's like, oh, it sounds like such a cliche. Yeah. But I think that honest piece with ourselves, it's really hard, because in the end it translates again and again into habits of like self-neglect. And as if like I'm not worthy enough, like if nobody cares about me, and so I'm not going to care for myself. But no, it's like, and not only that, but responsibility. We have responsibility for our husbands or our wives or our children or the grandparents. Like, we want to take care of everybody else but ourselves. So I think that awareness piece is huge.
It's huge.
And the transparency with yourself and with somebody else could be the start of a healing experience, for sure. Yeah.
Just calling a friend and say, like, I feel sad, and I feel sad for no reason, and knowing that what's helpful is when it's a supportive friend. Maybe we can have friends that are not always going to be as empathic, but just reaching out, that's going to change our mood. But also getting outside, kind of having an awareness of our sleep pattern is going to be really helpful. Opening the blinds and saying hello to the sun, even if it's really, really cold and really hard to get out of bed. Those are beneficial things.
Yeah, small, simple steps that are doable. You got to start somewhere.
Yes. And that's key to remember too for New Year's, right? Because we do the big goals. Like, I'm going to lose 20 pounds in January. We'll start off really small, and it doesn't necessarily have to be in January. And not to say that someone has to lose weight, but break down the goal into small steps, and then that's how we more likely achieve that goal.
Yeah, make it doable. Because a lot of times I fail my resolutions. A lot of people don't do it.
I don't even do them anymore.
No.
I was like,
because they're not realistic.
They're not practical,
I mean, they're big wants and desires, but it's like what you're saying, the smaller little goals that we implement and then start tackling are more doable.
Definitely.
Yeah, one small step versus a huge mountain to climb, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you so much for being here today. You're so insightful, and I love the red light idea. I want to go out and try that myself.
You can just change the light bulb itself, to a red light.
That's so interesting and fascinating.
Yeah.
Because when I was studying for today, I didn't really see anything about the red light. So I learned about like light exposure and light therapy, and that is totally fascinating. But the specific red light, because you hear about blue light, you don't really hear very much about red light. So I love that. I love to learn. Yeah. So you just taught me something today too. So I'm gonna go check the red light out. Where can we buy that? Just anywhere at your local Walmart, Home Depot?
Yeah, literally with the red light bulbs. If someone wants to know more about it, Andrew Huberman, he's an ophthalmologist and neuroscientist, and he has a podcast, a really great podcast that breaks down a lot of these things. And
neuroscience is right up my alley.
Yeah,
I love it.
It's totally your alley.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look into that. Okay. Well, thank you so much. And families, thank you so much for also tuning in today. I do hope that this episode of Beyond the Classroom podcast was helpful and insightful for you today. If you have any questions, please reach out to Student Services Department. We are here during the winter months. We are only closed on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day and New Year's Day. But other than that, we are here Monday through Friday during business operating hours. So happy holidays. We wish you all the best during this season, and please begin to take care of yourself. You are worthy of your own self-love, and thank you again to our own licensed clinical social worker. That's her title here, but she's an LMFT. Joanna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And please tune in to our next episode of Beyond the Classroom. Thank you so much and have a great day.
Thank you.